And we are live. Look at that. It's now working just fine. Oh, I should pause myself. I can see what I'm doing. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the pre-show. We're about 10 minutes away from getting started. 9 minutes away. I'm a little bit behind today. 9 minutes away from getting started on today's Network Plus study group. We'll get started at the top of the hour. This is the pre-show where you basically have the magnificent vista of the Messer Studios studio, and you get to hear me drone on while I check cameras and the recordings are going, and I double check that everything is working with switching, like that thing there and this thing here. We do have a digital map. Here we go. Sort of a push pin, digital push pin. So wherever you happen to be in the world, you can plug in where you are by going to the URL on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Folks are checking in right now from all over the world. Thank you so much for being here. We always have a good time. This first hour will be me asking you brand new questions for the Network Plus exam. I've written all new ones every month. We write them all. Hello, Mal. Good to see you. Thanks for being here from St. Vincent. I'm doing pretty well here because I'm in Florida and it's the winter and I'm happy. That's one of the best parts of the year. We tend to have two seasons in Florida. We have oppressive and then not as oppressive. And we are currently in the not as oppressive season, which is always good. Always works out well. We've got a lot of questions. Oh, I mentioned the first hour is me asking you questions. The second hour is you asking me questions. Well, how do you do that? If you go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, you can submit a question for what I call the after show, which is really more just an extension of the current show, but it's our after show where I ask, take your questions. You just go to that link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. There's a tab at the top, and we will go through those questions in the second hour. I don't tend to look at those questions until we get to the second hour. That's sort of how it works for me. But I think we're in pretty good shape. It's the holiday season. There is hustling and bustling already starting. Being here in Central Florida, all of the holiday events, the parks, the theme parks are always holiday-ish, holidaying in their regalia, which is always nice. Lots of lights and lots of decorations and lots of very nice thing to hang out and see if you happen to be in the Orlando area. And we are, so we do, and we enjoy it. It's kind of nice. Folks already checking in. Folks are here from India and from Iowa and from Utah and from South Africa and from Florida. Hello, fellow Floridians. There are a few checking in. Thanks for being here. NC, North Carolina, I'm assuming. There's my Canadian folk, my kin. We have family in Canada, as I've often mentioned. So it's nice to see you checking in. Thanks for being here. We've got folks in Colombia and the UK. Oklahoma is here. Something about the winds. Hey, Philly, good to see you. There's Italy and Nigeria. Orlando Epcot. You're at Epcot on the live stream? I would not be spending my time on the live stream if I was at Epcot because there's great pizza in Italy. You can talk to folks actually in Italy that will tell you that's not actually true. But for the purposes of Florida, it's actually very good pizza in Italy. And such nice folks. Because in Epcot, the folks who are there are people from that country. So it's always nice to hang out and talk. There's Edmonton. I got kinfolk in Edmonton. There's Montana again. Our family member in Montana just arrived yesterday here in Florida. Can't imagine why you want to hang out with us for a week. What is the temperature right now? That would be good to know. It's probably why. He's just a traveling man. He goes everywhere. We got 5 minutes to go before we get started. Let's do one last check. This is sort of my sanity check. Stream's looking good. I'm currently sending YouTube about 6 megabits per second, what I'm sending them, which is a 1080p HD stream. We don't do 4K streams with YouTube because there's a delay when they take my stream and then they re-render it into a stream that fits for you. So that is what's going on there, is why there's a delay. That's why I don't send it in 4K, because it would extend the time frame that we're dealing with. When I ask a question, you're seeing me ask it about 6 or 7 seconds after I ask it. So it's relatively interactive, the way we have it set up. If I turn on 4K, that's extended to about 20 seconds, or it has been in the past. I haven't tested lately. And that's a long time after I ask a question before you're ever putting the answers in, which really extends things out just a little bit too much. So we do 1080p for our live streams, and that's why. I get people asking that from time to time. Yep, I can see the data rates are good. The data rates will change depending on the image on the screen, but currently and generally speaking, it's about 6 megabits per second. Our cache number, it caches up a little bit of information before it sends it to you. 3% is normal. If it goes above, well above that, if it goes above 3 to 4%, then something is not allowing that data to get to YouTube. That's the problem. So I'm not sending you directly this video. You are getting the video directly from YouTube. So it's a two-step process. I send it to YouTube. YouTube re-renders it and sends it down to you. And that's the way it works. It's all the magic that happens behind the scenes. Okay, we've got a lot to go through today. Hopefully these questions will be challenging for you, but you're welcome to ask any questions you would like for the after show, professormesser.com/QA. For Central Florida, it's kind of cold out. What was it let's see what the temperature is right now. Normally my clock would tell me. Let's go to the phone. It tells me it's 67 degrees. How are we even surviving today? Are we even able to make it through the day? Well, I'm just hanging out, I guess. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We've got a lot of good questions to go through. Again, if you want to open up a new browser window and head to the link on your screen, that's where you need to go to answer the questions we have for you today. That link, of course, professormesser.com/QA. Okay, let's see where we are and what we are doing now. I got a lot to go through today. All Network Plus in the first hour. I mentioned I will answer your questions in the second hour, but they don't have to be Network Plus questions. They could be questions about, well, anything, really. I don't know that I will answer any question, really, but I will try to answer the questions that you send. Seem reasonable enough. We'll have to see. We've got a lot here going on. I think a lot of people are going to be taking their exams over the holiday season. It's kind of convenient to do it at home. I think a lot of people will be doing that. Now, why don't I have my seconds up? Let's do that one. That's better for me. There we go. MC says, I stepped out of 8 degrees temperatures in Chicago on Saturday and came home to the Panhandle, Florida to 74 and humid. I like air that I can feel. I like that. It's nice to be back in Florida. We got less than a minute to go. Let's see. We'll take a sip, get things ready. Okay. See, folks in the chat room already saying, yep, I'm going to take it before the end of the year. It's a good time. Classes are over. Things are slowing down at work. You've got more time at home, or at least a little bit more time at home. Some of us don't have much more time at home, but some of us do. And that's always a good thing. So it gives people a little bit more time to get in there and study and take these exams. Make sure all of that happens. Okay, we are approaching the top of the hour. We've got a lot to go through. I see new icons on my YouTube studio. I need to check that out. There's new things I need to play with once we are off the air. So we'll try that. We are done. 12 noon is the time. Let's go to our keynote. Oh, that sure is bright. Let's bring that down a little bit. We got a green light. Green lights are always good. We'll hit play. That works. This works. Cameras look good. I think that means we're ready to get started, everybody. Why don't we do a live stream? Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the December 2025 Professor Messer N10-009. I guess it would be good if you were able to see me on this. N10-009 Network Plus Study Group. We have a lot to go through today. As you can already tell, I'm so busy behind the scenes, I don't even know what buttons to push. This is the live stream where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and we get to see how well you might know some of these Network Plus topics. There is a lot to go through. As you know, we have questions for you that we talk about on this live stream. Every new study group is a new set of questions. So you will not be seeing questions from a previous study group, except for the very first one. I'll explain why in just a moment. If you would like to participate, if you are here live and you would like to participate, pop open a new browser window, head over to this URL right here, professormesser.com/QA, and you can ask a question, or you can submit your answer to the question there. You can also submit a question for the second hour. And that's what we do in our second hour is I take your questions and we'll answer them. For that, it can be an answer about anything. It could be about certifications or IT or really anything in general. More than happy to do it. If you pop up in a new browser window, head over to that particular question right now. You will see it here. Our number one rule when answering these questions is we do not answer questions in the chat room of the live stream. Instead, we go over to the question link that you see on the screen, professormesser.com/QA. Also, please no hints in the chat room. The question asks, and this is a question from a previous study group. We call this our rewind question, by the way, because this is a question that allows us to see what types of things you might be remembering from previous study groups. It also is a good chance to make sure that you're able to get in and answer the questions properly. This question asks, which of these connectors provides the highest fiber density in a single interface? This is a question from last month's study group. Is the answer SC, BNC, MPO, LC, or ST? Yep, just a bunch of letters all put together in 5 different answers. Those are real things. They are all real connectors. They are. I had to check. I had to double check. There are real connectors. We will come back to this question in just a moment and see how you did with today's rewind question and see how we do. I want to remind everybody that we do one of these study groups every month. Thank you so much for attending if you are here live. And if you're watching this on the replay, thank you so much for watching our replays. Of course, we archive all of these to our YouTube channel. You're able to go back and watch every single one of these replays, hopefully in an effort to finalize your studies for the N10-009 exam. And when we are not here on our live streams, you can follow us on our other social media sites. We can go to professormesser.com/YouTube/X. You can also go to /Twitter. I have it going to the same place, /Instagram, /Discord, /LinkedIn, whatever it happens to be, or even /calendar if you're trying to find out what our events calendar is like. Of course, all of these links are also available on the CompTIA or on the Professor Messer website. You won't find those on the CompTIA website. They're on professormesser.com. You can find all of them in that list. Also remind you that the current Network Plus exam is a version N10-009. This is an exam version that was released on June the 20th of 2024, which means that we estimate it will retire somewhere around the fourth quarter of 2027. So I think we have plenty of time to study for this relatively new exam. It's a single exam, takes 90 minutes in length. That's when the clock starts. That's how much time you have to complete the exam. And you could get a maximum of 90 questions. You might get fewer than 90 questions. The score you're shooting for is on a scale from 100 to 900. The score is 720. And there are on the exam a mixture of different kinds of questions. There will be multiple choice questions like the one we just talked about. There will also be performance-based questions. We'll talk more about performance-based questions in a moment because, of course, as always, I have a brand new performance-based question for you in this study group. Don't forget that we have our entire course available for you to watch for free on our website. You can, of course, do that. All of our videos are available there. Nothing is behind a paywall. You don't have to register to be able to watch them. Nothing is hidden from you. We also have additional study materials you might like. You might want to check out our course notes or downloadable versions of the videos. We also have our Exam Hacks ebook and so much more. You can find out more about that, how to support us at professormesser.com/netsuccess. We do have this available for replay immediately after the event on our YouTube channel. I also create an audio-only podcast distributed version at professormesser.com/podcast. That's where you can find our A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. All of those live streams are archived there. If you have a podcast listening program, you can connect your program, your application to that XML file at that link on your screen, professormesser.com/podcast. And there's also, if you're listening maybe on a streaming audio service, there's also links there. You can simply search for Professor Messer, for instance, on Spotify, and you'll see all the podcasts there as well. Just an easy way to get your hands on all of that information. You'll also notice about a day after our live stream is over, my marketing manager, Lori, hey, Lori, she's watching this replay at 2x speed and putting in all of the timestamps so that you're able to find information very, very quickly. And you can go back to all of our previous study groups to find anything you're looking for and click and find it exactly where it would be in that video. Just another way to help you find information quickly and make your studies that much more efficient. Thank you, Lori, for that. If you're someone in the chat who takes advantage of that, give Lori a heart emoji or tell her thanks in the chat room. I'm sure she's watching that chat as it goes by as well. Also let you know that when we're not doing this live stream, we have our 24/7 chat up on our Discord server. You can find it at professormesser.com/Discord, where thousands of people are there studying for their Network Plus, their A Plus, their Security Plus, and other certifications. There's usually somebody in there to answer questions almost any time of the day, it seems. People are there overnight from different parts of the world. You can join us and participate. We'd love to have you join this really remarkable community. Such nice people are there. Go to professormesser.com/Discord. I know you don't usually hear about people talking about their communities on the internet that way. We really do have a nice group of people over on the Discord. Eventually, you will need to take your Network Plus exam. And if you are in the U.S. or Canada or a U.S. territory, you're able to get these vouchers for your exam at a discounted rate. They're the exact same vouchers that you have if you were to buy it from the CompTIA website. They just don't cost as much, which is always a benefit when you're trying to save a little bit of money for the holidays. Not only do you get these vouchers at a discounted rate without needing any type of coupon, you don't need any type of registration. You simply need to visit professormesser.com/vouchers, but I even give you a little bit more. I give you a little bit extra. So I have compiled a list of tips and tricks for studying and tips for taking the exam itself. I call this my Exam Hacks ebook, and it is only available if you purchase a voucher or a success bundle from my website. We do not sell it separately. Relatively exclusive. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to the question I asked earlier. This is a question from last month's study group that we did okay on. The answers we got were a little bit of a rainbow on the last study group, so I'm really interested to see how we do with this one. The question again asks, which of these connectors provides the highest fiber density in a single interface? Is it SC, BNC, MPO, LC, or ST? I'm going to stop the poll and we're going to see what you answered. We did a little bit better this time, didn't we? I think we might have remembered something from last month. At least somebody did. Thankfully, you're here because I can't remember what happened last month. 47% of you say the answer is MPO. 20% say the answer is LC. 16% say ST. 11% say SC. We almost had double digits all the way around. We have 5% of you that said the answer was BNC. So not a majority, but pretty close to it. 47% of you say the answer is MPO. MPO. It sounds like something you'd get in court, but that's not what's happening there. No, it's a real connector, an MPO. Multi-fiber push-on is the name of that abbreviation. No, I'm not making that up. That's the actual connector right here. Has a little lock on it. When you push it in, it kind of pops in place. And you have to pull this little connector. This lock has to be pulled out before that will remove itself from the interface. This is a way that we can get a very high density or relatively high density number of fibers in a very small place. This is always the challenge for engineers that are building a switch or a router or any other type of equipment is how do you get the most amount of interfaces in a 19-inch connection? Those racks that we have in our data centers are standard sizes. They are 19 inches in width. So how many can you fit in there? You know, we realized for Ethernet, we could fit about 24 connectors all the way across. Maybe you could fit 36 if you really cram them in there. And our challenge with fiber is a different amount of engineering we would do. Let's look at this connector straight on. You can see looking at this, it looks like it has two connectors on it. Like maybe there's a fiber in and a fiber out, a transmit and a receive, but those are not fiber connectors. Those are holes in the connector to help guide it into the interface. The fiber, if we were to look at it straight on, are these little tiny dots you couldn't even see in the other picture that are between those two mounting holes. You can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different fibers in that single connector. So there, instead of having just two fibers in a connection, your density is much higher with a multi-fiber push-on, because we can get so many additional connectors into that link. Indeed, that is the right answer. MPO, 47% of you got that one absolutely correct. 20% said LC, which is a fiber connection type, but this is not an LC connection. You do need to know what LC connectors are for your exam. Same thing for ST. ST connectors are another type of fiber connection. These are important to know, not just because they want to throw a lot of acronyms at you, but when you get into a data center, you will see all of these different fiber types. And somebody might tell you, we need to connect that device over there to this device over here. Well, this device has LC connectors. This device has MPO. What type of fiber do we need to get? Because you're not going to cut these fibers generally and put on your own connectors. It takes a very specific type of equipment and knowledge to be able to splice a fiber connection. And even then, the connections are not always as good as having a single connection all the way there. Somebody has to be really, really good at what they do to get the fiber working that well. So you do need to know ST and LC, but those are not connectors associated with that. SC connectors are also a fiber connection. The only one in here that is not fiber is the BNC connector. BNC is a copper connector, commonly associated with coax. So if you're someone who is trying to determine the best place to go for these connectors and try to understand those different fiber connection types, I have a video for this, the N10-009 video in section 1.5. The name of the video, oddly enough, fiber connectors. That's where you will find it. Well, it looks like you're able to get in and answer the questions that we have for you today. I want to see how well you do with a more practical question, however. And as many of you are aware, on your exam, the very first question you get on your exam is not a multiple choice question. Multiple choice question, of course, is just like the one we just saw, where there was a question and there were multiple answers to choose from. Even if you didn't know which one of these fiber connections it was or which one of these answers it was, you could have guessed. And you had a 20% chance of getting it right. On the exam, there are usually 4 answers. So you have 25% chance of getting it right. That's a pretty good number if you're just guessing. But CompTIA wants to challenge you. They want to make it so that the questions are not quite so easy to guess at. So at the very beginning of your exam, you will get a handful of questions, around 3 to 5, maybe more, maybe less, that will ask you questions in a format that is not multiple choice. And they call these performance-based questions. Performance-based questions can be anything. They can be fill in the blank. They could be drag and drop. They could be a configuration where you have to type things in a command prompt. Maybe they're giving you information on a screen and asking you to interpret the results of what you see there. That's very different than a multiple choice question. And it really requires you to know the content. Of course, as I always say, if you know the topics, if you have studied the official Network Plus exam objectives, it really doesn't matter how they ask the question. You're going to do fine because you will know the answer. So don't worry about it being something other than multiple choice. If you've studied the content, you're going to do fine on it. And I have an example of that right here. This is today's performance-based question. It is a Linux performance-based question, although I would say there are probably questions associated with this that you could do this question in Windows as well, but I'm looking specifically for Linux commands. This is select the best Linux command for each of these troubleshooting steps. Really, there's only 2 troubleshooting steps you have to know. The situation is that a network is experiencing intermittent connectivity to a server at 1.1.1.1. For those of you listening on the podcast, this is the word 1 spelled out. one.one.one.one. Now, I want you to tell me based on what you would type in at a Linux command prompt, how many IP addresses are associated with this FQDN and what are they? So you may even want to try this on your own machine. If you're running Windows, you could do that. In fact, I would say for this first question, you can almost swap out the commands completely between those two. But this might be a good one for you to try out. The next question I have is, what is the last router hop IP address before reaching the IP address of 1.1.1.1? That's, again, one.one.one.one.one. And what do you think is happening in that last hop? Bit of a leading question. It assumes that you've gone through this process and done it yourself. Hopefully, you're able to pop open a command prompt on your machine, whether it's Windows or Linux or anything else, and try answering some of these questions. I will step through these at a very high level. I'm really hoping you know what commands to use. So that might be a good place to start. If you just know the commands and you don't know what the answers are to the question, that's fine. Just type in the commands and you can submit them at any time with the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your answers. Of course, please no answers in the chat room, and of course, no hints in the chat room. This is a set of troubleshooting steps that I feel like we do all the time. So I think it's important for you to be able to get those answers. And very much like the CompTIA exam, I am not asking you for the commands you use for this, although it would be useful if you would be able to submit those. But using whatever command you're using, find out that information. Sometimes there are more than one command that can answer the question that you're posed with. For example, how many IP addresses are associated with this FQDN and what are they? I can think of two different commands right now, both in Linux and sort of in Windows and also in Mac OS, that have that you could use to answer this question. And I'll accept any one of those. In fact, I'm not even asking you specifically what the exam is. I'm asking you how many IP addresses are associated with the FQDN. And what are they? So you can't just guess. There's 20. Well, okay, what are they? Oh, I didn't know you'd ask me what they were. I'd have to know what the command is to be able to do that. So make sure you're familiar with what those are. As always, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We will instead see how you do with troubleshooting at the command line. What's good about this is this command line, as I mentioned, works well in Linux, obviously. Works pretty well in Windows with maybe a few changes. We will talk about that. And it works perfectly well in Mac OS as well. So we'll go through each one of those. I have screenshots of all of this that we're able to step through so you could see the process that I went through, and you could start to see if you went through a similar process to get the answers for all of these. As always, you can submit your answer at any time. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answers. I'm having a look at what some of the answers are here. And having these, and a lot of you are seeing a lot of different things that are going on here. Again, I am not asking you for the commands, but if that's all you know, put them in there. You may not be running Linux. You may not be at a command prompt right now. You may not be able to run these commands and do this, but don't worry. I will step you through them. For those of you that are submitting the commands and these answers, thank you. That's great. You can absolutely send those in, kind of lock into your mind. Yes, I know what to do on the first one. The second bullet, you need to tell me the command for that one as well. What command would that one be? So there are two different commands here that you would have to run to gather this information. At least two to gather this information the best way, the most efficient way. You should do that. So make sure you submit those at any time to be able to make this happen. These, of course, are all commands that you will see in this list. I know the last bullet in here, people are submitting answers about this like, what are you talking about? Because the last bullet asks, what do you think is happening in that last hop? Like, what do you mean? What's happening? What is that? There's something about that last hop that's a little bit different than the other hops. Now I just sound kind of weird. Yes, there's that last hop different than the other hops. Hop, 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 hop. I'll just say that a lot. There is something that's different in that last hop. What is it? What is different and what do you think is happening? Let's step through these. Let's see how we do with these. A lot of you have submitted answers. Let's go through them one by one and see what I did on my screen and see if this makes sense, some of the things that you see on your side. So the question again asks, select the best Linux command. I didn't capitalize there. I'm so sorry, Linux people. For each troubleshooting step. I look forward to your cards and letters. by the way. A network is experiencing intermittent connectivity to a server at 1.1.1.1. That is one.one.one.one.one. So I asked how many IP addresses are associated with this fully qualified domain name, and what are they? So you might have already figured out that we are trying to determine the IP addresses associated with one.one.one.one. And I think we could sort of guess what one of them is, right? I think we know what one of them might be. The command I use to gather this information is dig. And here are the results of the dig command that I ran on my screen. I went dig, can you dig it? 1.1.1.1. That would be dig space one.one.one.one. Now you could also run NSLOOKUP. Perfectly reasonable to do. In fact, if you're on Windows, that's the command you could run. And if you are in Windows right now, you could pop open a command prompt. You could type NSLOOKUP space one.one.one.one. And you would get a similar output. It's formatted a bit differently in NSLOOKUP, but this is probably the results that you got. The dig format tells you here's the dig settings. Here is the option you had. You wanted to find the internet address. That's what the IN and A is associated with for one.one.one.one. And you can see the answer section shows two different IP addresses. The two different IP addresses are, to nobody's surprise, 1.1.1.1. Those are the numbers 1.1.1.1. But look at the second one. There are two IP addresses that were output as part of this dig command. The other IP address is 1.0.0.1. That's interesting. This is not incredibly unusual for this particular site and this particular configuration. For those of you familiar with 1.1.1.1 or one.one.one.one, this is Cloudflare. This is an organization that provides network services on the internet, primarily reverse proxy, but they have other services they provide as well. A lot of organizations use them in front of their web services to help with security and to help in cases of denial of service attacks. They are a very popular service. You've probably heard of them. And it's one that we have in front of the Professor Messer website as well. So I use this IP address quite a bit. And this is a great one to ping because IP address 1.1.1.1 should always be available on the internet. I realize most recently that's not always the case, but most of the time that's exactly what you should use. The reason that we have two IP addresses is because we have redundancy. This is a bit of a round robin DNS. If we were to run that dig command again, we might get those two IP addresses in a different order. And that's because your device usually takes the first one and uses that. So Cloudflare uses those two IP addresses to hopefully maintain a little bit of uptime and availability and some load balancing against different servers that they have in their infrastructure. A great IP address to use for any DNS. So if you're looking for a better DNS for your network at home or one at work, you could use 1.1.1.1. You could resolve to 8.8.8.8. 4.4.4.4. There's a lot of different DNS providers out there. You should do your own testing, your own how fast they happen to be. There are a lot of review sites that will review DNS providers. That's a good one to have there. So if you use dig to find this information or you used NSLOOKUP, either one of those is probably the most efficient way to do this. And the answer to this is two. There are two IP addresses and they are 1.1.1.1 and 1.0.0.1. So now we have answered that first bullet. Now the more challenging one, I think, the one we're going to think about is this next bullet that asks, what is the last router hop IP address before reaching the IP address of 1.1.1.1? Well, the dig command is simply performing a query to a DNS server and giving us information on how that DNS server is configured. What's configured in the DNS server, in this case, is pretty applicable to what's happening in the real world, but it doesn't have to. And this tells us nothing about hops. It tells us nothing about the path that our packet took to get to the IP address of 1.1.1.1 or 1.0.0.1. So you've got a few options there as well. So the command I use to be able to look at this is traceroute. In Linux, you spell out the entire command, Traceroute. Could we use that in a sentence, please? Traceroute. Traceroute. Traceroute in Windows is abbreviated. Windows has that whole 8-character thing, and to maintain that across different versions, they abbreviate that trace RT. We aren't going to spell it out anymore. I'm done with that. We're finished. Trace RT is what you would use in Windows. And you could do a trace route for 1.1.1.1 or 1.0.0.1. Now, what you will find is that it will start going through the links. These are the IP addresses on my network. It starts at 10.1.10.1, which is my local gateway. It goes to 100.121. This is my internet service provider is doing a large-scale natting on their network currently on this configuration. So I ultimately get routed to another 10 dot address. There were 2 other hops that were filtered from the type of trace route that I was doing. Yours, where you happen to be, may not have that filtering in place. Not a problem. But in my particular case, I might have to do other trace routes, perhaps to other IP addresses, or use a different protocol in trace route that would not be filtered. Hopefully, it's not the response to the trace route that is being filtered, but I couldn't see hop 4 and hop 5. We have hop 6 here. We've got, in fact, you can see that is a Cloudflare. It's not even cloudflare.com. What is that? That's an interesting result. I've got to check that one out. Just saw that. I don't think I modified. No, this is a screenshot, so this is not modified. But look at the step 7, the hop just before the last one. You can see the last hop is hop 8 in my case to 1.1.1.1, which was resolved to an IP address of 1.1.1.1. Sounds like for people on the podcast, I'm just repeating myself. I am not. And each one of these, it is going through and measuring response times 3 times. So it will go the first IP address and it will perform the trace route 3 times and give you the response times for that. Then it'll go the second hop and do that. Notice the hop. My question, of course, is what is the last router hop IP before reaching the IP address of 1.1.1.1? In my particular case, there's not just one of them. Notice that hop 7 performed 3 separate tests of the trace route, but all 3 of the tests gave a different IP address for each hop. There is an IP address ending in 236. There's an IP address ending in 12. And there's an IP address ending in another one in 236. So really 2 of them. I got of the different ones here. There are 2 different unique IP addresses that you don't use those together. 2 unique IP addresses that are associated with that final hop. So in my case, the last router hop IP address before reaching 1.1.1.1 was either one that ended in 236 or one that ended in 12. Now yours would be perhaps even different depending on where you happen to be in the world, but it also might be very similar as well. So you've got some choices of things you can do. I think there is, if you were to have a look at this, we have to now answer the last question, which is, what do you think's happening in that last hop? What do you think's going on with what's happening in that last hop? Because there's more than one IP address, that means that our route is going to 1.1.1.1 using one router on one request, using a completely different path on the other request. Well, that's interesting in itself. Why would it be going to different IP addresses? Well, that's because they'd like this to be redundant. They would like to have options when people are trying to access this very popular internet service. And we don't know for sure because we don't work at Cloudflare, but I think based on the results that we are getting from a simple dig command and a simple trace route command, that you can very easily now be able to see that there are multiple routers in use. So this would make sense because if we lose one of these IP addresses, let's say that in this case, the IP address ending in 236, maybe it fails. Maybe we're no longer able to access that subnet. Maybe the device power supplies went out. Maybe it got hit by lightning. Anything can happen. So in that case, there's another IP address for that particular hop that can take over. And now that is providing some redundancy. And we're seeing that redundancy in action because some of our packets are going one way. Other packets are going a different way. It's only one hop difference once it gets down there. But depending on where you are performing a trace route from and where you're performing the trace route to, you may find very big differences between one trace route and another. So sometimes performing a trace route with at least 3 different hops can give you a perspective. You can, of course, increase the number of tests that you do on those, more than 3 different tries, 3 different attempts of traceroute, not 3 different hops, to have that there. So if we have to think, what do we think is happening in that last hop? We think it's redundancy. We think it's uptime and availability. They are doing something to make sure that we are always able to communicate to the final hop, which of course in this case is 1.1.1.1, whether you're spelling it out or whether it's the number. Either way makes sense. So in this case, our answer, how many IP addresses associated and what are they? In my particular case, it was 2 IP addresses, and the last router IP address, the last hop IP addresses, we had 2 that were in our list. You could maybe see even more if you perform additional trace routes. And you can see that what we think is happening there is to have additional routers there for redundancy and high availability. They are all there and available. That might be something good to look through. If you're someone who is working on command lines, you need to know a lot of command lines for Windows and Linux. They are listed in the CompTIA exam objectives, so you are able to know exactly what they are and be able to find this. If this was an actual exam, you would probably be asked what command this was or how many IP addresses. These are perfectly reasonable questions, I think, for a performance-based question. Notice they aren't asking you for the command in this question, or I'm not. I want you to tell me the results and how you got there. This is very common on the exam. They don't tend to always ask you a direct question. Sometimes they'll ask you a question that requires you hop through them to finally get to that point. Hopefully you did well on that one. That was our performance-based question of the month, something brand new, something that you can now put in your pocket and take into the exam with you. Hopefully that will help you as you go through your command line studies for your Network Plus exam. Let's shift gears now and perform, or instead of moving a performance-based question, let's move back to a multiple choice question. Here I have a multiple choice question for you on the screen that asks, a packet capture shows a VLAN header contained in an Ethernet frame. Which of the following would best describe this frame? Is it 802.1q, 802.11ac, 802.1x, 802.3, or 802.11h? I think I found every 802.11 reference on the exam and I put it in this question because it can be confusing when you see all these different IEEE standards pop up. Fortunately, there's not a lot of IEEE standards you need to know on the exam. And after a while, these standards just become sort of your standard nomenclature. They become the standard way you communicate to other people. And in fact, we even use abbreviations. For example, you might have even heard someone say, oh, that's a .1q. And that they're referring to the standard, the IEEE standard 802.1q in that list. So that's one of those that you might want to try. If you think you know the answer to this one, submit your answer at any time. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Should be a nice one to answer. A lot of people answering this one quickly, which I never know is because we all know the answer. We're going to get it absolutely right. We're going to crush this question, or we're just trying. We don't know, and we're just going to throw it in there and see what happens. You submit your answer at any time. Go to professormesser.com/QA and see if you can answer this one. Let's see how we did with this one. The question again asks, a packet capture shows a VLAN header contained in an Ethernet frame. Which of the following would best describe this frame? Is it 802.1q, 802.11ac, 802.1x, 802.3, or 802.11h? All of these are real things, by the way. I didn't make up these letters and numbers. These are all actual things, and you should know what they are. If you don't recognize any one of these, you might want to write it down because all of these did come directly from the Network Plus exam objectives. Let's see how you answered this question. We will close our poll and see the results. Oh, we got almost 70% of you or so said the answer is 802.1q. That's what you thought the answer would be. As I was reading this back, I was even thinking to myself, do I know what the answer to this is? There's too many letters and numbers in it. But we had a pretty good list. 802.1x got 10% of the vote. 802.3 got 13% of the vote. 802.11ac, 8% of the vote. And 802.11h is 0% of the vote. Come on, really? We didn't have anyone bite on that one. You were probably right to do so. In this case, those of you that answered 802.11 or 802.1Q, even did it to myself, the answer is what we were looking for. .1Q. I even mentioned it in describing this particular question. But what is that? What in the world are you talking about? And when we talk about .1Q, we are referring to most commonly connecting two switches together and creating a trunk in which we could send all of the VLAN traffic from one switch to another, but keep them in that VLAN as they're moving from switch to switch, even though there's a single cable between those switches. So the single cable, but we're able to put a lot of different VLANs on it. And when we do that, we call that trunking. I don't know why we call it trunking. We just call it. Is it a trunk? It's not. Are we putting things in a trunk and delivering it somewhere and then taking things out of a trunk? Not really. I mean, sort of, but not really. I don't know. We'll have to look at the standards to find out what in the world that was about. The idea is that we have a normal Ethernet frame that you would normally send. When you add a VLAN header in the frame, it sticks additional data in here between the source MAC field and the type field. So we really are changing the structure of the frame and how it looks. The structure of the frame, when we do that, this means that we need to tell our switch, look out for that particular extra field we threw in there. If we didn't tell the switch, it wouldn't know what to do with it. It would think, whoa, your type field got really messed up. No, it didn't. I put something extra in there. So I want to configure that particular interface as a trunked interface, as a trunking interface, or a .1Q interface. You'll see that very often. When we add that additional header, now we're able to put information into that particular frame. .1Q is what allows us to do that. And in fact, if some of you are really Cisco geeks to go back in the day, prior to .1Q being ratified, Cisco made up their own standards. They do this all the time, quite honestly. And then we end up not using them in the future. And this was a good example. They had something that was similar to this called ISL. So if you're in your Cisco switch and you're configuring, it's got some really old software, or somebody's mentioning ISL, it does come up every once in a while. You'll see somebody mention it. Nobody's running ISL anymore, however. Everybody has switched over to the standard because everything is compatible with the standard. So everything's pretty much .1Q now. You won't see ISL being used for any of those. But we had all of these other standards. By the way, all of these standards are listed in the official exam objectives, so you should know all of them. Anything that is in 802.11 has something to do with wireless. 802.11ac is one of the very large, broad wireless standards that was released, along with 802.11a, b, g, n, AC, and AX. Those are the big ones. You might also see them referred to as Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 7. There are different standardized names for those that you can find. 802.11h is related to wireless. It is an encapsulation of standards that have been pulled into the rest of the 802.11 standard at this point. But when they were introduced as an 802.11h. This is a feature added to wireless networks that is able to use the proper amount of signal for the type of traffic that's around. So the idea was that we had these buildings, high density areas where a lot of people had access points, and all the access points were just using up the most amount of frequency. Even though you might have been sitting right next to the access point, you're sending out frequencies that were creating interference for everybody else in your local area. So what this standard does is find the right frequencies to use and the right power to use for the people connected to that access point. And it works pretty well. And it's now been implemented in all of the latest 802.11 standards. We've already gone through .1Q. 802.1x is a standard for network access control. It's a way that you can authenticate to the network before you're ever allowed access to the network. And we go through that in our authentication section of the Network Plus and the A Plus and the Security Plus. So you may have seen 802.1x before. The X is not just something, a holding place. That is the actual letter X, a capital X that's in that list. And 802.3 is the committee name for Ethernet. So if you are looking for standards on Ethernet, you want to be sure that you are following the standards for Ethernet. You've been told that 1000 base T requires category 5E, and then you look at my material and it doesn't say that, and you're wondering why is there differences? Well, because one person looked at the 802.3 standards and another person did not. The 802.3 standards is where you should always go to find all things Ethernet. So don't trust me, don't trust a third party, don't trust anybody but the standards themselves. They are the ultimate authority of all things Ethernet, and you can download them for free from the IEEE website. Those are the 802.3 standards. So those are the different standards you should know. You guys did really well on that one. Almost 70% of you say the answer is 802.1Q, and that is the right answer for the .1Q. Let's do another question, shall we? I think we shall. I have a question for you, and it's right here. This question asks, let's see if I can type the button. This question asks, there it is. A network administrator is installing a pair of new firewalls, and the design has only one firewall operating at a time. Which of the following would best describe this design? Is this multi-factor, active-passive, north-south, in-band, or on-path? All of these terms come directly from the exam objectives, so we need to find out what these are. I want to say that I want to throw this in as a gimme to see if you happen to know what these are, but now that I'm looking at the answers, I'm wondering if we got these right. Obviously, all of these are hyphenated answers, so hopefully that didn't throw you at all. The question again asks, a network administrator is installing a pair of new firewalls, and the design has only one firewall operating at a time. Which of the following would best describe this design? Is it multi-factor, active-passive, north-south, in-band, or on-path? If you think you know the answer, there's your link. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Will we get close to 100% on this one? I want to feel like we should, but maybe we won't. Maybe a couple of these or even three of these are kind of similar, confusing in a way. Maybe. We'll see. We'll see what your results happen to be. You've been putting in the answers pretty quickly on these, so I'm wondering if this is one that you might be already familiar with. And we'll talk about this question when we are done, since my background is in large-scale cybersecurity, next-generation firewall implementations. We can talk about why the design might be this way and why we might want to do it in a different way or not, why we might not want to do it in a different way. We'll talk about those. There's always an advantage and disadvantage of any type of design, and we can talk about what those are. Let's see how well you did with this one. The question again asks, a network administrator is installing a pair of new firewalls, and the design has only one firewall operating at a time. Which of the following would best describe this design? Is this multi-factor, active-passive, north-south, in-band, or on-path? What did you answer? Let's find out. We'll stop our poll. It was a gimme. 93% of you say the answer is active-passive. 4% say on-path, 3% say north-south, and 0 for multi-factor and 0 for in-band. It was a bit of a gimme, granted, but it gives us a chance to talk about firewalls and how you would design these firewalls into your network. With an active-passive design, you've purchased two firewalls. Most of the time, the second firewall costs the same as the first firewall. Both of those are the same price. You're paying the same amount for both of those firewalls. And you're plugging both of them in, you're powering both of them on, but you're only using one of them. The idea behind this, of course, is now you have some redundancy. If the first firewall that's currently active fails, the second firewall will recognize that that one has failed, and it will now start providing firewall services until that one comes back, and then we'll hand it back over to the first one. To do this, those two firewalls are usually directly connected to each other with a cable. You don't even put a switch between if you can help it. Just directly connect them with an Ethernet cable so they can talk to each other. It synchronizes everything between those. It synchronizes session information so that when the second one picks up, it knows the people that are already communicating through the first firewall, and it still keeps those sessions active through the second firewall, so nobody even knows anything happened. It is completely invisible to the end users. Visually, it looks something like this, where you have your internet provider providing you with services. Here's your two firewalls, the active firewall and the passive firewall. And then on the inside of your network, you might have a third-party router. You might be using your firewall as a router, but I added the router icon. There's also usually a switch right behind it that everything connects to, and then you'd have web servers and other switches, and the rest of your network is back behind that other switch. This is usually a core switch since you're coming in on this core network from your internet provider. Now, if you have an outage, you have traffic coming through, it's all normally going through that initial firewall to the web server that you might have there. But of course, there's going to be an outage at some point. It's not an if, it's a when. And what if the first firewall fails? The second firewall, because it's constantly communicating to that first firewall, suddenly realizes, wait, you're not there anymore. I'm taking over. I'm now the firewall that we're going to use. And all the traffic coming into your network now is going to go to the second firewall to be able to communicate to that web server. Now, this is a very common firewall implementation, but it's sort of people see this as sort of a waste because you are purchasing two separate devices. You're putting two separate devices on the network, but you're only using one at a time, which means you're also not supporting the most amount of traffic that two firewalls would normally be able to support. Well, with active passive, this is the way it works. It has one that is not being used and one that is being used. The natural question, of course, is, well, why don't you just turn on both of them? That's called a active-active configuration. The challenge when you have multiple firewalls communicating at the same time and actively forwarding traffic at the same time is not only do they have to keep track of what's going on, but now you might have a situation where the traffic is communicating asymmetrically back and forth to the internet, which means it may come in one direction, it may go out another direction. And that's why it's important to always keep those sessions synchronized in real time between those firewalls. This does complicate things also when you're troubleshooting, because when packet is going through that firewall, you're not sure which firewall it's going through. There are different ways to determine which firewall it goes through at any particular time, a number of different options. And so that's a scenario where you might run into a challenge from a implementation. Are you using both firewalls that you purchased at the same time with active-active? Yes, you are. Are you able to maybe effectively double the amount of throughput because both firewalls are active? Yes, you are. Are you making this incredibly difficult to troubleshoot and in some cases difficult to implement, to engineer and implement into your network, especially if the firewalls are not near each other? Yeah, you're making it really difficult for us at this point. So there are advantages to active-active. There are also disadvantages. And I would say for the implementations that I have done, when you present the advantages and disadvantages to people, the vast majority of folks choose the method that provides the most consistent communication and the easiest to troubleshoot. Most implementations are indeed active-passive. They're much easier to engineer, much easier to troubleshoot, much easier to figure out where the traffic is going. And in many cases, that's the most important part of their process is we want to keep things up and running, but we also want a consistent way of troubleshooting these. So really depends on your scenario and what you'd want to do. Active-passive is a very common and very easy way to implement and get up and running very, very quickly on your network, especially if you're somebody doing a lot of firewall work. One of the things you will notice is if you start looking through the exam objectives, there's a lot of content on this Network Plus exam. We were able to shrink it into 87 videos. That's how much information is really on this exam. There are over 12 hours of content just on our Network Plus course. Of course, we're not only giving you an overview of this information, we're also doing demonstrations at the command line. We're showing you subnetting information. We're stepping through examples of that. There are protocols we talk about. We haven't even talked about encryption technologies and proxies and a lot of the other details that you'll find on the exam. We've just gone through 3 or 4 questions so far today. One of the things that I've done is, of course, all the videos are available for you to watch for free, but I also have taken everything from every single video and I put them into one single document. It is my course notes document. This is the PDF version of the course notes. So every bit of text from my videos, all of the important charts, all of the important graphics, they are in these course notes. The course notes themselves are available in a digital form that you just saw or a printed form. We call this our physical edition. Notice it is a full color, perfect bound, sort of a soft book bound type of configuration, obviously identical to the digital edition. If you can purchase either one. The digital edition you can download immediately. The printed edition, the physical edition, obviously I would need to print this out and send it to you. We print them on demand to you. But if you get the printed physical edition, you get access to the digital for free. Kind of the best of both worlds. You can choose either one of those. If you want to learn more about it, see another overview of the course notes, you can find out more at professormesser.com/NPCN. That is the Network Plus course notes. Another thing that can help you, hopefully, with your studies. It's also something that helps us keep this crazy experiment going. So thank you so much for your consideration and your support of our course notes for A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. I know we got some time left in the hour, so let's do another multiple choice question that I have for you. This next question asks, a company hires a mobile shredding service each week to destroy their printed papers and documents. Which of the following would this process help to protect against? Would that be IP spoofing, denial of service, dumpster diving, rogue access points, or tailgating? We need to know all of these. These are obviously questions and answers that come directly from the exam objectives. The question again asks, a company hires a mobile shredding service each week to destroy their printed papers and documents. Which of the following would this process help protect against? Would it be IP spoofing, denial of service, dumpster diving, rogue access points, or tailgating? If you think you know the answer, use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. See what you think this one might be. This is all of these different answers on here are in the exam objectives. All of them are associated with something relating to protecting your systems. So make sure you're familiar with all of those and what the differences would be between all of them. Might be something to consider. This would be a good list of things to also consider when you're ready to take your exam, because you could get a question about any of these on your exam, not just the one we're going to talk about today, but all of the other answers that are on here too. Let's see how you did. The question asks, a company hires a mobile shredding service each week to destroy their printed papers and documents. Which of the following would this process help to protect against? Would it be IP spoofing, denial of service, dumpster diving, rogue access points, or tailgating? There we go. See, one of the things that we've always tried to do in our study groups is find a question we can get 100% on. And in fact, when this one came up, people in the chat room were going, can we get 100 on this one? And that's exactly what I was hoping to do with this one. Every once in a while, I do like to throw one that we can all feel good about. We feel really good about this one. But is that the right answer? It is. It is dumpster diving. That's the one that we want to do. This is, in the US, this has an interesting name because it's sort of a name that we use to describe a trademarked service, which is the Dempsey Dumpster. Literally, that's what the service name was called, the company to be able to do that. If you're in other parts of the world, you may call this something different, but this is where you throw your garbage, your refuse, your trash, and usually it's the things that you're just throwing out. The things you throw in the garbage sometimes have important information on them. So a lot of large organizations will be able to find a way to make sure that this information that you are throwing out is still protected, because people will go to your garbage bin, they will jump inside, and they will grab all the papers and take them. These are not normal people. These are people trying to find out information about your organization. And there could be a great deal of information on this list. There might be a phone list. That alone would be valuable, but there could be customer information. There could be information about the company that nobody knows about. There's a lot that's in there that we have to worry about. And you will find that a lot of organizations will put this behind a fence. They will lock their garbage in an effort to keep people out of their bins. And they might have organizations come by and they will bring up a truck, bring out all of your papers, and they will shred all of this paper on site. So they don't even take the paper away. They just take it out to the truck. They throw it in. They crush them all up. They shred them all up. They make sure they are completely gone. They show you. They even give you the option, oh, do you want all this? We can give it back to you, or we can give you a document that says we were able to get rid of everything that was in there, and now we're able to take all of that away. The challenge, of course, is a lot of people will wonder, is it okay to go into somebody's garbage? Well, sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. So as I mentioned in our video in section 4.2 under social engineering, not every open garbage bin means that you're able to jump in and start taking things out. in certain jurisdictions, you may find there are restrictions or things you cannot do with people's garbage. I know. This is where we are now. So make sure you check with the legal requirements in your area to know what those answers are. Now, why wouldn't it be one of these other answers? IP spoofing is something we would normally do just by taking an IP address that's public, and we would make a copy of that address somewhere else. We don't need access to papers and documents to be able to provide IP spoofing. So destroying your printed papers and documents won't help or protect against that. Nor will it help or protect against denial of service. We don't need to look at your garbage to perform a denial of service on your network. We also don't need to look at your garbage to have rogue access points. We can find everything we need from the access point that is already there. That is certainly something to consider. And tailgating, where somebody has entered your physical building without official access, without authorization. That is something you can do without having to go through garbage. So all you need is the right timing. Somebody's looking the wrong direction. You're holding a pizza. You look like a delivery person. There's lots of ways to get into a network or into a building without going through the network. You can just go in through the front door. That's what tailgating allows you to do. Dumpster diving, though, is the answer on this one. That is a social engineering technique that is pretty important when you're working through it. Now, whenever you are thinking about what the options might be for renewing your certification, one of the things that a lot of people will do is they will start accumulating continuing education unit credits. And you can earn a webinar category CEU by simply watching this video, by simply being here. The way that you would qualify or document that you were here is you would need to follow these instructions. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. You click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put December 2025 Network Plus. And in the body of the message on the line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, dumpster diving tailgating. Those are your super secret code words of the month, dumpster diving tailgating. You submit those to me. It takes me about a week to turn these around, although I did some earlier that were less than a week. Yay for me. That doesn't happen often, but hopefully I can do the same for you. And you will receive a digitally signed email from me that qualifies that you were here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. Those instructions again, and you must follow the instructions to earn the CEU. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. You click the Contact Us link. You put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put December 2025 Network Plus. And in the subject line, or in the body of the message on the line by itself, rather, put the super secret code words of the month, dumpster diving tailgating. And I will know that you must have at least watched up to this point to earn that 1-hour webinar category CEU. Let's do another question. I know we're sort of at the top of the hour, but not exactly. So let's squeeze another one in here while we have a chance. This question asks, a user has just started their laptop and has received an API-PA address. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this address assignment? Is it the pool is exhausted, jitter values are elevated, LLDP is not configured, MFA is not used during login, or 802.1x is disabled? That is the question that we were looking for. Let's see if you happen to know which one this is. The question again asks, a user has just started their laptop and has received an API-PA address. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this address assignment? Is it that the pool is exhausted, the jitter values are elevated, LLDP is not configured, MFA is not used during login, or 802.1x is disabled? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/login and lock in your answer. If you think you know the answer, go to the link. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We'll figure out the details of this as we go through the troubleshooting, stepping process to figure out which ones are right and which ones are wrong. We'll figure out the details of this as we go. Some of you were asking earlier about the CEUs, the Continuing Education Unit credit. You can earn that credit whether you're watching live or whether you're watching on the replay. So you can go back to all of our replay videos. You can watch all of them and get your... How many is it for Network Plus? Do you get 7? Is it allowed 7 in a 3-year period, something like that? You obviously need like 20 or 30. I think you need 30 CEUs to renew your Network Plus if you're renewing from that, that is exactly what you would use. But it's something that I think that a lot of us are using to renew our certifications. So if you are, it's another opportunity to put one in your pocket and have something to do with that. You don't have to use CEUs to renew, of course. So this is just one of many ways you can use to renew your certification. It's another thing. A lot of people are worried about collecting CEUs. You may not need to collect any. There are a lot of ways to renew your certification without collecting a CEU. I'm just giving you an option for one of those. Let's see how you did with this question. It asks, a user has just started their laptop and has received an API-IPA address. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this address assignment? Is it the pool is exhausted, the jitter values are elevated, LLDP is not configured, MFA is not used during login, or 802.1x is disabled? Let's stop our poll and see how we did. Another big number. I'm wondering now if we really got this one right. 78% of you say the answer is the pool is exhausted. 16% say 802.1x is disabled. 6% say LLDP is not configured. Nobody said jitter values were elevated. Is that necessarily true? We'll find out. 0% say MFA is not used during login. So we need to find out what the answer might be. Let's just show the correct answer. It's the 78%, of course, saying the pool is exhausted. All right, there's no pool. We didn't talk about a pool. What are we talking about when we talk about an exhausted pool? We're talking about the address pool on your DHCP server. DHCP is the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. And commonly, when we first plug in a device, we turn it on, we connect to the wireless network, we are assigned an IP address automatically by your DHCP server. This is something that we just commonly have. But what if there's a problem with your DHCP server? What if it's not active? What if somebody kicked the power plug out? What if you've run out of addresses on your DHCP server? We refer to this as an address pool exhaustion. This means that your client, your desktop, your laptop, or whatever you're connecting with is not going to receive an IP address that can be routed outside of your network. Instead, it will create an IP address on its own called an API-IPA address. This is an automatic private IP address. It's a private IP address, but it's not able to communicate outside of our single subnet. So you can't communicate across the internet with this particular IP address. That's a bit of a challenge. You will certainly get a help desk ticket when somebody is assigned an API-IPA address. So if your problem is that you've run out of IP addresses to send, then you need to fix this. This might happen because you have a very small or relatively small pool of addresses. You might have 50 addresses that you can send out. But this might be a coffee shop. So a coffee shop may have people coming in and out. You walk in the coffee shop, you order your coffee, maybe you check the web, you connect to the wireless network that's in the coffee shop while you're there for 5 minutes, then you walk out. But the lease on that IP address might be for 24 hours. Well, you've just grabbed that IP address and then you walked out. You're not coming back to that store until maybe tomorrow. So in the meantime, nobody's able to take advantage of that IP address. So one of the very common things you can do is to lower that lease time. Make it so that each IP address is only good for 30 minutes, only good for an hour, only good for 4 hours. You can adjust this on the DHCP server. This is a good way to make sure that devices are able to maintain and keep their IP addresses, but you can make more IP addresses available in a shorter period of time. That is what we would do if we were running into an addressed pool exhaustion, and that would be a good reason that you would receive an API-IPA address. Now, what about these other options, though? 802.1x is disabled. As we mentioned earlier, 802.1x is the ability or a configuration that requires you to authenticate to the network before you're even able to send information across that link. In fact, you may be wondering, if you walk into a conference room in a corporation, you may be thinking, well, I'll just plug into the network that's in the wall. Now full access to the internal network. If they had 802.1x disabled, that would be true. But these days, most people do not. They would absolutely turn on 802.1x to prevent you from doing that exact thing. So if you're trying to connect to your corporate network, and before you connect to the wireless network or the wired network, it asks you for a username and password, that is most likely 802.1x. That has nothing to do with receiving an API-IPA address. LLDP, the Link Layer Discovery Protocol, which is a great protocol usually used between switches to be able to send configuration information back and forth. I capture packets on these and show you in the videos on the course. LLDP not configured means you won't get any configuration details from that device, but that has nothing to do with the addressing of an individual machine, so that would not apply here either. Jitter values are associated with the time frames between the frames that you're receiving on your network. Those are especially important if it's a real-time protocol like voice over IP. You want those jitter values to be relatively low so that the packets are coming through at a relatively even rate. But anytime you get a delay or any type of extended time frames between these packets, your jitter values will increase. That is certainly bad for listening to a phone call, but has nothing to do with assigning addresses on a device. And then we have multi-factor authentication. That's what MFA is not being used during login. That means you're probably just putting in a username and password and no additional authentication factors. Well, that has nothing to do with the assignment of an IP address in this configuration either. So in this particular case, the only one of these answers that is really the one that is by far the most likely reason for this assignment is that the pool is exhausted. That is the answer that we were looking for. That's the one that 78% of you got absolutely right. You did a good job with figuring out what the right connection would be between API-PA and how we get there. You'll notice, in fact, that I never mentioned DHCP in the question or in the answers. So you have this extra step you have to go through to determine what the actual answer might be. This is very common on the exam and something you should consider when you're starting to study and become more familiar with these topics. Earlier, I was mentioning, and really throughout the study group, I have been mentioning that we get all of these questions, all of these answers, and all of these topics from the official CompTIA exam objectives. The exam objectives themselves tell you everything you need to know to pass this exam. This is probably one of the most popular questions I get, which is, how do I know when I'm ready to take this exam? Well, CompTIA has created for you a list that tells you everything you need to know. I have a copy of the objectives up here. I guess I'm one version behind. They've changed the graphics on the front a little bit at this point. The exam objectives, though, give you great levels of detail. Let me quickly step through this. So this is domain 1 and all the things you need to know for 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. Here's the second 2 pages for domain 1 and all of the topics associated with everything on the list. We're only in domain 1. Domain 2, network implementation, is routing protocols, switching technologies, wireless and physical installations. Section 3 is network operations. Those are all the topics you need to know. Section 4 has more topics associated with network security. And Section 5 is troubleshooting everything on the network. And then in the back of the exam objectives is a list of acronyms and some hardware and software if you're setting up your own lab. That is a lot of content, a lot of bullets, a lot of topics. And if you were to look at this list, you'll notice that it matches our videos exactly because this is what we used to create our Network Plus course. That's how you know that you're getting the most accurate course, is that it is following the guidelines that CompTIA has already published and that they stick to practically 100% when you sit down to take your exam. That's why I can tell people, if you know every topic on this list, there's nothing more you need to know. Everything is here to be able to make that happen. It's here at this link. You can go to professormesser.com/objectives and you will be taken to, in fact, why don't we just go there right now? I have this, this video thing right in front of me. We could just head over and you will go to this page, the CompTIA exam objectives. You need to click on the A+ objectives, the Network Plus objectives, the Security Plus objectives, and then I have a screenshot here of the page. I even tell you should scroll down to the red box that's there. What am I talking about? Well, let's do this. Let's click on the Network Plus objectives. Well, thank you, Google, for providing me with an advertisement. So you'll get a page like this that shows you the Network Plus content, and it gives you kind of an overview of it. You want to scroll down until you hit this red box right here. That red box says Get Network Plus Exam Objectives and Practice Questions. If you are filtering cookies, if you're filtering JavaScript, you're probably not going to see this. So make sure that you allow this page to work so that you're able to see that red box. You'll put in your email address You will say, by submitting this form, I agree to the privacy notice and authorize CompTIA to contact me. And then, of course, you read through the privacy notice. Of course you do. And then you click Access Now, and it gives you a list of all of the exam objectives, the ones that are in English, German, Japanese, Portuguese, and Spanish. There's even a practice test there. If we click on the objectives for English, it downloads them, and here they are. It's slightly newer than the one I have. They changed the graphics on the front page. Not much has changed other than that. These differences between versions are minor. So I'm going to save some of those things for later. We have a lot here to work through. Hopefully you're familiar with some of these objectives because you've already downloaded them. If you have not downloaded them, please do so. There's a lot of good stuff in these objectives. They will tell you everything you need to know. They're a valuable tool and they're free. Did I mention that? Nothing to pay to get the objectives. Something can help you for your studies. We do one of these study groups for Network Plus every month, along with our 2A Plus live streams and our Security Plus live stream. Our next Network Plus study group is in January. It's a whole year from now. Not a full year, just the next calendar year. So next month, stop back by on January the 14th. We have our A Plus study groups on January 6th and January 8th. Our Network Plus is on the 14th. We have another live stream happening this month, 2 days from now. This is a Tuesday. On Thursday, we have our Security Plus study group for December, our last live stream of the year. Can you believe it? I cannot. But if you wanted to wait until January, we also have a Security Plus study group on the 21st of January. Again, all of this information is available on our calendar on our website. You can always find out when our next live event is going to be by going to the events channel on our Discord or visiting professormesser.com/calendar. And that's a great place to go to find out more about when we are doing a live stream. There is quite a bit to know for Network Plus. You can find out all of the training materials that we offer along with our free course is available at professormesser.com/netsuccess. If you are in the US or Canada, don't forget you can save quite a bit of money by going to professormesser.com/vouchers. These are the same vouchers you could buy directly on the CompTIA website. Instead, these vouchers are available on the professormesser.com website, and something that can save you a little bit of money. Find out more about that by visiting the link. And of course, we're on social media, just like you are. You can find us at professormesser.com/discord/YouTube/Twitter/X/Instagram. We got a lot going on there. A lot of things. If you're on social media, we try to find out where you are and we go to the same place. So you can follow us by simply following those links or using the social media icons at the top of the Professor Messer website. Well, this brings us to the end of our first hour, but don't worry, I have another hour we call our after show coming up next, where I will take your questions and see if we can answer some of the things that you're interested in. Thank you so much for joining us in this last Network Plus study group of the year. Hopefully, we'll also see you in the new year with your studies as well. Thanks for joining us. Stick around. We'll start our after show in just a few seconds. Other than that, we will see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody. Okay, let's bring up this. Let's close that. Let's get rid of these things. Let's push a button. There we go. Now it's time for the after show. This is the part of the show where I will take questions that you have submitted, and most of the time I will answer those. We'll find all of these. These will happen. The way that you can participate is by going to the links that we have here. This link is available on this page, and it says you can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. We will be moderating questions during the session, so your contribution may not appear immediately. And the link that we're looking for is the same link we've already been using, professormesser.com/QA. And I will go through the list of questions that I have on the screen, and we will be able to find out what you are interested in getting answered. A lot of questions have come in already with these, so thank you so much for submitting some of these. We've got a lot to go through in this link. Thank you for sending all of these. Okay, so let's continue through. There were a number of questions about exams and differences between exams on this list. So I'm going to go to my website and show you links that I have that can help give you a perspective of differences between one exam version and the other. And I have a link for this. So the question that was submitted, let's see if I can find this and actually put it on the screen for you. Here we go. Let's publish this so that you can see it. This question from Regis, who asks, is there any major difference between the N10-007 and the N10-009 Network Plus exams? If so, which one is easier? Well, this is a good question. So in this case, you don't have to worry about which one is easier because only one of these is available. What CompTIA tends to do when they perform a update to their certification exams, and they tend to do this every 3 years, 3.5 years, they will update the exams. So 6 years ago, more than 6 years ago at this point, CompTIA released the N10-007. That ran for 3 years. They replaced that with the N10-008. That went for 3 years. They replaced that with the N10-009, and that's the one we're on now. So the N10-007 is like 2 versions old. The amount of differences between that version is remarkable. There are quite a few differences between these 2 exams. You do not want to study materials that have listed that they are for the N10-007 or for the N10-008. You can't take those exams anymore anyway. And CompTIA does tend to update quite a bit between different exams. I have created some documents that show the differences between the 8 and the 9. So it's not the 7 and the 9 because that just goes back way too far. But if you just wanted to see what are the differences between this latest exam and the previous, you can go to the Professor Messer website. Under the Network Plus menu is a link that says Start Network Plus here. And you'll get a list of all of our study materials, links to the study groups and our 24/7 chat and our weekly pop quiz questions for Network Plus, our success bundles, our course notes, so much more. But if you scroll down to the bottom under the Network Plus frequently asked questions, there is a question that asks, what are the differences between the previous N10-008 exam version and the updated N10-009 version? Well, it turns out I have an article that I wrote that has all of the details broken down, not just at a broad view. Whenever you see these articles online, you tend to get these very broad strokes that they tend to be updates, and it's just a bunch of AI nonsense that somebody's put on their website. This is a document that I went through every one of the exam objectives. I determined what was dropped, what was added, and then I listed them. So there's quite a bit here. First, I give you an idea of the time frames. So I have a Gantt chart here that shows you the N10-008 was available between November 15th, 2021 and December 20th, 2024. So this retired a year ago. The N10-009 has been available since June 20th of 2024. You'll notice they overlapped a little bit. So they didn't just cut people off. You had some time to finish up if you were still working on the previous version. And this version will be available until somewhere around December of 2027. We don't have an exact date yet, but that's an estimate. I think that's a pretty good estimate based on what we know. And then I start stepping through and showing you what are the differences. There's quite a big difference between the 8 and the 9. I went through and measured and calculated every single objective that's on these exams. So for the N10-008, this is the yellow circle. There are 590 objectives. If you were to count every objective in that list, there were 590 on the N10-008. The N10-009 is the smaller circle to the right, the blue circle. And the reason it's a little smaller is because it has fewer objectives. They shrunk the size of the exam just a little bit. So it has 430 objectives on it, 27% smaller than the N10-008. This is probably a good idea, and I'll explain a little bit more about this in a bit if you'd like. If you looked at the exact objectives, you'll notice that everything in yellow are things that were dropped from the N10-008. 50%. Half of the N10-008 objectives don't even show up in the N10-009, and a third of the objectives on the N10-009 are brand new. Were never in the N10-008. This is a significant difference. And even if you go back to the N10-007, it's even a bigger difference, obviously. So already we can see that you should absolutely be studying from materials that have been specifically written for the N10-009, because if anybody is telling you anything related to the N10-008 exam, you got about a 50% chance of that never showing up on the exam. That's just the practical side of things. That's the reason I created these charts, so you would be able to see that. So really, what is different though? Well, I went through every single exam objective, and I have a list here of every topic that was dropped from the latest version of the exam. And so this is a list of these broken out by the different domain numbers: 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. You may be wondering, why is the exam so much smaller than it used to be? Well, for example, the list of detailed 802.11 wireless standards that was on the N10-008 is no longer in the N10-009. I still see people spending a lot of time learning details about 802.11a and b. These are two wireless standards that simply do not exist anymore. And that's one of the reasons they broke this out of the exam. It's not necessary to know that anymore. And you can see the big list there. Well, that's what's been removed. What about the things that were added to the exam? Same process. I went through every single section and listed out the things that were added to the exam. This is quite a bit. Obviously, big difference. And then, of course, I give you some topics you can use to help, some ideas you can use to help with your studies. That is my list of the differences between the N10-008 and the N10-009. That document is on my website under the N10-009 Network Plus menu, where it says Start Network here. Simply scroll the bottom and look at the frequently asked questions for more about that. Hopefully that gives you some perspective. I'm glad I wrote that article up now. A lot of people have asked questions about it. It does come in handy when those questions come up, because sometimes you just don't know. Should I be studying that? Should I not be studying that? Always go to the objectives. That will tell you everything you need to know. Absolutely, no question about that. For example, let's go back to Regis, since Regis has followed up with that question and said, okay, well, is the N10-009 loaded with IPv6 questions? Is it loaded like a potato? Is it loaded like trouble? What is loaded in a practical term? Is that 2 questions, 4 questions, 10 questions? It's difficult sometimes to get a perspective. So let's see if we can do that in this particular case. Let's bring up our exam objectives. I've got them here on the list. Our exam objectives for the N10-009. And let's find all of the listings here associated with IP version 6. Most likely, since this is a network type exam, we should be able to find aspects of this. Of course, this is a PDF. So if you wanted to search for IPv6, you can do that. It will take you to section 1.8, where it says summarize evolving use cases for modern network environments. So IPv6 addressing is part of that particular area, 1.8. And of course, 1.8 talks about software-defined networks and VXLANs and zero trust architecture and SASE and infrastructure as code. And finally, IPv6 addressing is part of that. And you have to know specifically how to mitigate address exhaustion, how IPv6 addresses or mitigates the exhaustion that we have of IP addressing. And we talk about compatibility requirements for tunneling, dual stack, and NAT64. That's one section of IPv6. Are there others? There's 2 pages. And then in section 3.4, given a scenario, implement IPv4 and IPv6 network services. There are a few network services in here specific to IPv6, probably really referring to stateless address auto configuration, or SLAC. That is definitely an IPv6 type scenario. The others here are kind of generically IPv4, IPv6 services. So the question that was asked is, how much IPv6 will it be loaded with IPv6 information? Well, let's go back to 1.8, which is sort of our IPv6 addressing, generic IPv6 addressing section of this. You'll notice that is one topic in section 1.8 that is part of many topics. It's part of SDN and SD-WAN. It's part of VXLAN. It's part of ZTA. It's part of SASE. It's part of IAC. It's part of source control and playbooks and templates and authorizations. And there's a lot in this section. So We also notice there are other sections in Section 1 in Domain 1. There is IPv4 network addressing. There's network topologies, architecture, and types. There is transmission media and transceivers. Let's keep going backwards. There are port numbers. You've heard of these. The IP types. We've got cloud concepts and connectivity options. You've got comparing and contrasting network applications, appliances, and functions, and the OSI model. Of all of those different sections in Domain 1, those make up 23% of your exam. So almost a quarter. We're going to say a quarter just to make the math easy. We'll say 25% or so of your exam. A quarter of your exam will be topics or questions that come from one of these 8 different domains and what appears to be hundreds and hundreds of different topics, or at least over 100 different topics. That's a lot, which means on your exam, you might get a question about IPv6. You might not. Statistically, you would probably get a very low number of IPv6 questions. And I think statistically on the exam, you would probably get a relatively low number of any topic because there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of topics on here. How many? I'm glad you asked. Let's go back to our topic list. We had the listing of this. So on N10-009, 430 objectives in that list as I count them. So just over 400 are in that list, which means if we were to look at this list, there's way too many topics in here to think that we're going to be seeing a lot of repeated topics listed on our exam. It would just be very unusual. This is also a similar question I get with people that talk about subnetting for IPv4. So that's in section 1.7. You can see there is one of the sections in 1.7 is subnetting for variable length subnet mask, VLSM, and CIDR, classless interdomain routing. That's just 2 bullets. 2 of the 430 objectives. And on section 1, over 100 of these, 2 bullets are about subnetting. That means you might get a question about subnetting. Maybe you'll get 2. Kind of would be unusual to get 3. I guess statistically it could happen if you get that. So a lot of people spend a lot of time on individual topics, or they get siloed, or they get some type of view, just tunnel vision on one particular topic. And if you get into tunnel vision on these, and you start spending days and days and days of your time studying VLSM or studying IPv6, you're disproportionately studying for the potential of that particular topic appearing on your exam. Now, is it important that you know things about IPv6? And is it important that you know about IPv4 subnetting if you want to get into networking? Absolutely. It's important that you know all of these topics if you plan to get into networking and more. This is just the beginnings of your path into the world of IP and any type of networking. But on your exam, you might only get a certain number of these. So it's important that you sort of summarize and get an idea of how many should you really expect on the exam and what they might be. Or are there any topics that you're seeing on a practice exam somewhere else that don't seem to match this? If you're seeing topics outside the scope of the objectives, you can ignore those. The exam focuses on what's on this document, on your exam objectives. So get the exam objectives. This is where all of the questions will come from, is this list. And if you're trying to determine, am I ready for my exam? Is this topic going to be on the exam? Am I ready to take this? This will tell you. It will give you all of that information. It will help you understand whether you're ready to take the exam or perhaps whether you're not ready to take this exam. Certainly to consider. Same thing applies for other topics. For example, I've had some other questions come in about things like Linux. For example, how much Linux can I expect on this exam? Well, this is one where, generally speaking, the networking exam isn't really about one type of operating system or another. The one that I gave you today said Linux, but as I mentioned, all of these commands that we were running have Windows or other operating system alternatives to be able to run through this. And in fact, if you go to the domain 5 for network troubleshooting, there is a list of everything you need to know. Software tools. You need to know about what protocol analyzers do. From a command line perspective, you need to know ping, traceroute, or traceRT for those of you on the Windows side, NSLOOKUP, TCP dump, dig, netstat, IP, or ifconfig, or ipconfig, depending on the operating system you're using, ARP, nmap, LLDP, CDP, and a speed tester. Those are the software tools you need to know. You don't need to know more than that. So if you're getting a question that's asking about some other command, some other utility somewhere, not important for the exam. It might be interesting, might be important for a career in networking someday. It might be useful for other things, but will not help you for this particular exam. And that's what we're here for, is to get you through this exam so that you can learn those other things in the future. That's the idea behind this. A lot of people will tell me, why don't you go outside the scope? People need to know so much more about networking. People need to know about all of these. Yes, you do. You are correct. You do need to know about all of these other things in the world of networking. But we're trying to get you through this certification, and this is what you need to know about this particular certification. So keep in mind, that's where we would go about these and understand the differences between all of these. Let's keep going through this list. We have a lot to go through in here. Let's take one from Brand. This is an interesting one. I'm going to try to decipher this one. This one was interesting enough that it caught my eye, and we're all going to kind of step through this and figure out the details. Brandon, it says, in Network Plus study, I learned about doing Cat6 mail connection types. And I think Brandon is referring to the 568A and 568B wiring, which would really apply to any twisted pair standard, category standard. It would apply to category 3, category 5, category 5E, category 6, category 7. But it's a twisted pair cable. We got it. We understand, Brandon. We're with you. However, in the real world at work, I terminate Cat6 female connections, and it seems different Cat6 female connections have different orders for type A and type B. Is there a reason for this? Well, there might be. And I suspect I know what's going on there, but on its face value of this question, it is asking about how we wire a connector. That is the fundamentals of the things we do with networking, of course. You got to have a network to be able to plug into a physical network to plug into a wired network. So I want to bring up for you the 568A and 568B standards, because I think I might be able to answer this as part of my exam details. Now, I have to remember, of course, all of my 568A and 568B and where I stuck all of those things in my standards, which means I go back to, here's how I do it. You probably do it this way too. You go back to your objectives. There they are. You type in 568. You have to type it right, 568. And see where the 568, is it not in there as 568? Can I not search for it as 568A and B? I don't think we removed it from this version, did we? We have all these wires and connectors in here and being able to work through them. Maybe it's maybe we did remove it. Now that I'm thinking, I cover the A+, the Network Plus, and the Security Plus, and a number of things were removed from this exam. I wonder if the A and B was one of those. They all sort of blend together in my world after a while with all of those. So that may be what we're looking at. That's where I go. And if I don't see it in that list, it's not on the exam. Not something I can find to be able to go through this and understand what those differences might be. Whenever you want to work through anything relating to wiring, you need to make sure that you're doing it right. If you're studying for your A+, in fact, I'll bring up my list from the A+ exam. One thing I want to kind of go through real quick, this may be one of those times where it might be useful to find the details of all of those. Of course, a lot of the things I mentioned earlier, that a lot of the objectives were removed. It's much smaller. One of the reasons it's much smaller is CompTIA I think they felt that there was too much that people were doing that was rote memorization. And they really wanted people to think broader. They want you to think about the topics and how to apply them and not spend all of your time memorizing wireless standards, memorizing what color wire goes where, or whatever it happens to be. There are times when you will need to know those things and you will learn it eventually. But this is one of those times where having a rote memorization may not be the best way to go about doing this. But let's say you're studying for your A+, because A+ certainly has 568A and 568B in there. So I'm going to pull up my A+ details for this. And I'm going to check one more time on my objectives. One of the things I always do whenever we have a new version of exam that comes up, I always go through the process of trying to understand where I would, what things have been added, which things have been removed. So I make this big spreadsheet of everything that is in the list. So anytime I want to see what was the real difference between all of those, I can do that. I can go to, for instance, my older versions of these. This, and indeed, I do show that it was dropped from the 009. So the 009 no longer lists out 568A and 568B. If you're spending your time on the 568A and 568B colors, you're wasting your time for the Network Plus exam. For A+, you are not. So I thought I would bring up the A+, just so we can talk about this, because I think the question was a good one regardless. Whether you're studying for the Network Plus or not, you're terminating these wires at work, and you're thinking, why does the termination not look right? Why does it not follow the 568A or 568B? And I think I might have an answer for you in this list. So I'm going to find this. I'm going through way too much talking and way too little demonstration. I realize that. But it's me quickly flipping through and finding the 568A, 568B in my A+, and making all of this happen. It's in the troubles. Is it in the troubleshooting section? I think it is. I have to find these on the fly, and it's a live stream, people. We're doing what we can. We're trying to make it work. I think I might have it right here. 568A. There is a section on the 1201 exam which goes through the 568A and 568B colors. If you're not familiar with these, again, this is outside the scope of the A+ exam, but it is useful information to know, is when you look at the end of an Ethernet cable, there are certain wires connected to certain pins of that RJ45 connector. And those colors are standardized. There's more than one standard. There's two standards. What? I know, but that's the way it turned out. There's a standard we refer to as the T568A color scheme and the T568B color scheme. This is a standard called the T568. So it's effectively type A and type B on these color schemes. This standard, by the way, covers a lot of different things about twisted pair cabling. This just happens to be this section of the standard that deals with colors. And you could see that they are colored a certain way. You would have different numbers for your RJ45 connector. If you're looking at what I call the bottom of the connector that does not have the tab, it is numbers 1 through 8 right across if they're pointing up. So you can see pin 1 on this end, pin 8 on this end. If it's a T568, it starts with greens and it has browns on the other end. T568 starts with orange. So if we were trying to figure it out from this image, which one it was, we'd have to look really close. Do I have this one really close? I think I do. Let's see if there we go. So if we were to look at this one really close, you could see pin 1 is orange and white, pin 2 is orange, and you can kind of walk through and see. So you have to have really good eyes, but if you did that, you could see, oh, that is wired exactly as you might see a 568B. Now the question that was posed, though, was more than just looking at this. In fact, here I did this so you could actually see it do this. Though you would plug these in, but what if it wasn't an RJ45 connector you were plugging in? What if you were trying to plug in a jack? We talked about it in that question. It was the female connection. This usually is the key jack that you would have. That provides you with a different visual than what you might expect. Here's an example of this. Let's look at this 568B again. You'll notice it starts with white and orange, goes white and green, blue, white and blue, green, white and brown and brown. So it starts with orange as the first two, white and orange. Let's look at a jack that somebody is wiring up. This is a jack. This is pretty normal to have this. This would plug in. You can see you've got the female connectors here at the top. They're being used. And this is somebody who's punching down the wires for this particular jack. And notice it has on here how convenient that it has colors for A and colors for B right here on the top of this. But wait a second. Hold on a second. that A and the colors don't match pins 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those don't match the colors we had for A. And we just did B, where I just told you white and orange is pin 1, orange is pin 2. This is B, and it's blue on here. Looks like it's blue. It's hard to tell what the colors are. It looks like it'd been pulled off of this one. Like they're all the same for this one, and the only thing that changes is the green and the orange, which, by the way, is the only thing that changes on the standard as well, which is why these remain blue and brown on this side. But they're not in the right order. Why is that? Is it putting them in a different order in the jack? And that's where the difference is. This is really putting these in an order that make it more convenient for you to punch down. And then behind the scenes, it reroutes that color to the appropriate pin on the RJ45 connector. So although you are not punching them down in the 568A or 568B order, when it gets to the jack, it is in the right order for A and B based on the colors that you see on the top. So it's a bit of a unusual scenario. You can see it a different way here. You can see that it shows you A and B, and it has blue and green for A, and then blue and orange for B. Oh, wait, that doesn't make sense to have those that way. There's another view of it and where those would plug in for that. It's just making it more convenient for you because it's putting together the same colors so that you can do it very quickly. And then it puts them in the right place on the actual jack so that it does match 568A or 568B. So hopefully that's giving you a little bit of insight into that. As I mentioned earlier, 568A and 568B are not part of the Network Plus exam objectives any longer. But if you're studying for your A+, that information might help. Or in this particular case, if you are studying or you're physically punching these down at work and you're wondering, why does that color not match these things that I learned somewhere else? That's why. They actually do match, just not in the same order when you are punching it down, which is very, very common on those jacks that you would install in all of those. Very useful to have there. There was a quick question that came up about, hey, can we watch these on a replay and get credit for them? You absolutely can. You can watch all of our past live streams on our YouTube channel. Just go to I could probably show you. If I go to professormesser.com/YouTube, which I should do myself to show you this on the screen, you will see something like this. Hey, tells me right now I have a live event going on right now into this mix. We got a lot on this list. All of our replays are right there. So you can always go back and see what all the replays happen to be, what all the things are that are important. You can see, well, you can't really see my subscriptions so much as somebody else's, but you can certainly go through and get all of the replays of all of the study groups that we've ever done. In fact, you can even go back and look at previous versions of our courses if you wanted to. I don't recommend that because that information is no longer accurate to the exam objectives, but everything is there. So you can really have the details of all of those. That's where you would see all of our previous live streams, be able to break that down. Let's pull up another question you might have. Got some more in this list. Let me clear out that one so I can see more of the questions on my side. Lots of these. Since we mentioned troubleshooting and we mentioned subnetting, and I mentioned to you, you might get one question about subnetting on the exam, or maybe you'll get two questions about subnetting on the exam. And I tell you, don't spend a huge amount of time on topics that you might only get one or two questions about. Make sure if you get it, you got it, and that's fine. But if you don't get it, it's not necessarily the end of the world. But Noah says, yeah, but I'm still working through it. So what kind of tricks do I recommend for subnetting? At its most basic level, and I do show you this in the course, at its most basic level, subnetting is nothing more than a binary calculation that occurs between one address and another. It's really quite simple when you start looking at the calculation that occurs between the IP address, the subnet mask, and the ability to borrow different bits from one part of the address or the other. But there is a calculation you have to do at a binary level to do that manually. And that process takes time. But if you've ever worked with any network people, they will know instantly, they'll be able to subnet in their head they'll be able to tell you, oh, 192.168.1.1/26 means that we have this many networks and we have this many hosts. They just know immediately what that happens to be. And I think it's one of those scenarios, and a lot of people describe it this way, is it is complete chaos until suddenly something clicks and you realize, oh, we're just cutting a pizza into different size slices. Or we are just taking one big thing and breaking it up into evenly sliced pieces that are all the same across the entire thing. And it could be, we're cutting it in half, we're cutting it in quarters, we're cutting it in eighths, we're cutting it in sixteenths. That's basically what subnetting is. There are calculations that you could do manually, but as I said, those take time because you have to do them at the binary level. But there are shortcuts. There's a lot of shortcuts available on the internet, lots of different ways. Some people use their fingers, where you can, if you're subnetting this one, the finger goes down and then you calculate 3 and there's a lot of things people will do to figure this out. There are also 2 different shortcuts for subnetting that are in my Network Plus course, because not everybody likes the same shortcut method. The 2 shortcut methods I tend to focus on are the magic number method, and I tend to focus on that one because that's the one that is taught in many of the Cisco books. They like that magic number method, and it is a good method. Basically, all of these methods are basically the same. They're just sort of presented in a different way with different things that you do in a different order, but they're basically doing the same thing. But it's a way to calculate a subnet without having to do any of the binary math. And who doesn't want that? So there's a nice way to do that. There's another method, because the magic number method does require you to do a bit of addition, subtraction, and maybe a little bit of numbers of 2. And one of the things that I always have a challenge with on my exams is I don't calculate well under pressure. I never know if I'm performing a shortcut if I'm adding or subtracting or multiplying the right amount. And so I wanted to create, and I did create, a subnetting shortcut method that basically has no math, 0 math involved. Technically not true. Technically, the only math involved is you have to add 1 or subtract 1. I can do that under pressure. I'm good with adding 1. I'm good with subtracting 1. Did that one in kindergarten. I got it. And everything else about the 7-second subnetting method, which is the shortcut that I'm describing, the 7-second subnetting has no math involved. Now, the way that you get around the math part is prior to the exam starting, or hopefully just as it starts, there is a chart associated with the 7-second subnetting method. That is the secret sauce of that method. And you are able to very quickly triangulate the answer based on the question. And I say it's 7 seconds. It's actually faster than that once you start doing it. This is the method that I used for my Cisco exams, because although on the Network Plus you might get 1 or 2 subnetting questions, it seems like half of the Cisco exam is subnetting. It seems that way. Probably not quite that bad, but it just seems that way. With so many questions, I got to where I was really second guessing myself on the subnetting side, and that's why I came up with this that had the charts, and now I can easily cross-tabulate. I know instantly if I have the right answer, and there's no math involved, so I know I'm not forgetting to subtract or add or multiply something else. Not every shortcut method is good for everybody. You should try some that make sense for you. Maybe you create your own method. It doesn't have to be 7-second or a magic number. You could use some other shortcut method. Find the one that works best for you. We often in the industry, we do have, and people argue all the time, why am I doing this manually? Why am I doing a shortcut? In the real world, I would just use an IP calculator. No, you don't. No, you might do that if you have a very, very, very big list of IP addresses and you're doing a migration and you want to really perform a sanity check to make sure that you have the numbers right. You might plug them into a subnet calculator just to double check yourself. But very often you will be in a meeting and somebody says, can we do that? You're going to have to calculate that really quick. Well, it's 100. Yep, we do have enough IP addresses. The subnet that we're using there will work fine. We don't have to change anything. Or it may be different. It may be that we can't fit another 10 addresses on that subnet because we have it subnetted down to a /28. And so you've already done the math there in real time to be able to answer the questions in real time. I guess technically you don't have to know anything as long as you can type it in and Google it, but that's almost never the situation you find yourself in the world of networking or anything else relating to technology, really. So I think that's where you should focus, is understanding the process, finding the process that works best for you, and being able to do this in real time on the fly. In reality, the subnetting part of this becomes a lot more automatic when you get it. It sort of clicks, and suddenly it goes from something that was very chaotic into something that is very obvious in how it works. So I think that's the way most people attack subnetting, and I think you should as well. If you don't get it, maybe you should just study other things, because you may end up getting questions on those topics. You don't want to overstudy for any one particular thing, but it may be something to consider, especially if you are planning to do a lot of networking after you get your Network Plus. You plan to go to some other networking certification. Subnetting will probably be a big part of that. So you will eventually need to know how to subnet, but you don't necessarily need to know how to do that on the Network Plus exam. Just depends on what questions you happen to get. It's certainly a place to go. Let's keep going through the questions you have. We're approaching the top of the hour. I want to fit in as many as I can to be able to work through these pieces. Let's see. Let's talk about this a little bit. This is a question regarding taking the exam itself. I mentioned earlier on in the study group about getting a voucher, and let's talk about that a little bit in the process for renewing. The Christian is asking to renew my certificate. So Christian is already someone who is Network Plus certified. Christian says, do I need to retake the exam or pay an amount? Well, there's a lot of different ways to renew your certification. You might take the exam again, or you might not. You might pay an amount. You'll probably pay something, but it may be different depending on the process you choose. So let's step through the process really quick. First, let me tell you that in the YouTube video description of this video is a video titled How to Renew Your A+ Network Plus or Security Plus exam in just a few hours. Which sounds crazy, but it is real. There are ways to renew your certification in just a few hours. The best way to approach this in this video is I take each major renewal method and I describe what it is, and I tell you the advantages and the disadvantages of both. For example, Christian says, do I need to retake the exam? That's one way to renew. That's a very difficult way to renew your exam, by the way. We're not really renewing your exam, renewing your certificate. Let's get our nomenclature right. So you could retake the newest version of the exam, and you would, of course, be certified for another 3 years. That's one way to do it. But you'd have to study everything on that exam, and you're already certified. Why would you take the exam again? There might be a good reason for this, or there might not, but it's a question that's worth asking, is why would you go through that? That seems involved. You could collect CEUs. We talked a little bit about that earlier, and you have to do different things to get different CEUs very often. So you might have to attend a trade show. You might have to write a document. You might have to teach a course. You might have to take a course. You might have to get a CEU from a live event like this. And then you collect all those together. You present them to CompTIA and says, I've got all these CEUs. Please renew me. And then you give them a maintenance fee, and they renew your certification for 3 years. Didn't have to take an exam. Bonus, but you did have to go through and do all these different tasks. That might be a negative for you. See, there's always a disadvantage and an advantage to each one of these. Other certification methods might be to take the CertMaster CE, CE standing for Continuing Education. CertMaster CE is an online computer-based training program that you go through. It takes probably a little bit more than a few hours at this point, but you can do it in a day. You step through and answer all the questions on that CBT correct. If you get a question wrong, you just take it again. You can take as many times as you want till you get them all right. And that will renew your certification for 3 years. Do that in a day. You don't have to take the exams again. You don't have to take CEUs again. It's kind of an open book because you're there in front of the CBT. And you can spend all day doing it, and you can do it in a day. That's sometimes a big advantage for folks. So you might retake the exam. You have to do more than just pay an amount. You do have to take the CertMaster CE, collect CEUs, take a CompTIA exam, take a third-party exam. I try to detail all of these in the video. So if you're planning to renew your certification anytime soon, have a look at the video that's in the YouTube video description of this video, how to renew your A+ Network Plus or Security Plus exam in just a few hours. That might help you, might give you some ideas about what's right for you or maybe what's not right for you. You might find the right balance there between both of those. Let's keep going through our list of different questions that you have submitted. Thank you for submitting these. If you have a question, we may get a couple more in here at the end. You can submit it at any time with professormesser.com/QA. Let's keep going through the list. A lot of good questions in here. Since we were talking earlier about taking the exam and vouchers and how they are used, I mentioned that we need to talk about vouchers themselves. David says, I have a question about your exam vouchers. Can you explain the Retake Assurance voucher? I remember you saying CompTIA doesn't let you sell retake vouchers, or did I misunderstand you? Well, a year ago, that would have been true. But in the last year, CompTIA has changed things, and now Retake Assurance vouchers are available on the Professor Messer website. How about that? Things can change, sometimes for the better. I think this is for the better. When you purchase a voucher, you have the option of getting two different kinds. So if you were to go to professormesser.com/vouchers, you would get a page that looks like this. I have discount vouchers. I even have a little video that kind of takes you through what those vouchers are and why they are important. Let's pick a voucher, shall we? Let's pick, since we're on Network Plus, we'll pick the Network Plus voucher. Thank you, Google Ads. Here we go. We'll go to the Network Plus voucher, bring that one up, and it tells us that the list price for the Network Plus voucher is $390 US. On my website, $349 US. So it's a $41 difference. That's a nice bonus. When I say they're discounted, wasn't really kidding. There's a nice discount there on these vouchers. And then I say, if you want Retake Assurance, you can add that for $49. So what is this Retake Assurance you speak of? Well, let's keep scrolling down here, and I'll give you an idea here. Under the terms and conditions, there is a voucher terms and conditions for retakes. For voucher purchases that include a retake, if you fail the exam on your first attempt, use the same voucher to register and retake the exam. That was it. That is a Retake Assurance voucher. If you buy it without the Retake Assurance, you take the exam. If you fail, you have to buy another voucher. But think of it as an insurance policy. For an extra $49, now you have a retake there that you can apply towards this exam. It does also mention that all vouchers, including retakes, expire 12 months from the date of purchase unless otherwise noted, and the retake is only valid for the same exam version that you failed. You cannot use the retake for a different version of the exam. This is obviously not important right now because there's only one Network Plus exam that you could possibly take. But when you're in that period where it's transitioning between one version and another, we have a newer version of the exam that's being released. You could fail an older version. That version might retire. And then you think, oh, I'll just use my retake on the newer version of the exam. You will not, because the terms are that you cannot use that on the newer or any different version of the exam. It's all for one version of the exam. Once you do that, you're done. That's what a Retake Assurance is. It is available on my website, as you've just seen. And the difference for all of those, whether it's A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus, it's a $49 edition. That's your Retake Assurance. That's your insurance towards failing the exam, and then you don't have to pay anything extra. So it's a difference between paying $349 twice or simply adding on the $49 up front and hoping that you don't have to use it. I guess that's it. The time frame for retaking is the same time frame as the expiration for your exam. So you effectively have 1 year from the date of purchase to take and pass your exams, whether it's the first time through or the retake. You got 1 year, and you must take it. You must take the exams, all of the exams, before the expiration date. Not book the exams before the expiration date. You have to take them before the expiration date. That's what that's about. So that's the retake. Relatively simple, very straightforward, works like a champ, and you don't need anything extra. You don't have to call me and say, can you send me another voucher for a retake? You don't have to have multiple vouchers that you're juggling. It's one voucher number. If you pass, you pass. If you fail, you just use the same voucher number again to book the second one, but you won't need the retake, or will you? From my perspective, you've got the choice. You can decide which one you want to use, and they're available. Both of them are discounted on my site, and certainly less than you would pay on the CompTIA website. Let's keep going through the list. I think I've got one here. Here's a pretty good one. This was kind of top of mind for a lot of people. This is a question from Daniel. He says, can you work as a network admin remotely? And if so, what other certs are required besides Network Plus? Well, I think in many cases, most of what we do from a networking perspective, we do remotely anyway. In fact, if you work in a large organization or even a medium-sized organization, it's unlikely all of your networking equipment and anything you would be routing, switching, firewalling, bridging, or whatever, it's unlikely all of those are in one room that's in the same building that you sit in. We spend a lot of time as a network administrator at the command prompt of a device that may be located on the other side of the world, and that's what we're configuring. Or it may be in a different building, or maybe in a different state, maybe in a different country. From our perspective, it doesn't matter. We're at the command line, or we're working through the pieces of the configuration utility for that particular device. Sometimes you have a nice web front end, and you can perform that all remotely. So you might come into work, you might sit there, connect to switches and routers all over the world, and you never moved. You sat in your desk the whole time. Now that sort of lends itself to working remotely. And in the past, I think, especially during COVID, everybody was working remotely. The one thing that it doesn't do, and I think we are somewhat dismissive of this because we want to work remotely, but the reality is that when you're in the same building, sitting next to people doing things that you do, and you have a question, you can simply turn and say, what was the subnet that we were planning to use for that? And they'll tell you immediately, oh, you're planning to do this. And somebody else might say, yeah, but do you want to do it that way? There's a whole collaboration that takes place when you're all sitting in the same room together, asking questions against each other that, quite honestly, you cannot directly emulate through a Slack. You can't do that through a chat or messages or even a web-based conferencing, a video conferencing. Being immediate to those people changes the way that you work. And companies realize this. And they need people in one place so that we can all get together. Maybe the network team now needs to talk to the server team. Maybe the server team now also needs to talk to the security team. We need to get you all in one room to be able to successfully complete this project. Sometimes difficult to do that when everyone's remote. Where you start to see more networking jobs being remote is when there is some type of specialty associated with this. That generally means it's not an entry-level networking position. I used to work with a lot of people that worked with very large network providers. Think the AT&Ts, the Verizons, the large T-Mobiles of the world. I think I've probably been in to see all of them at one time or another. They all are usually, when you get to a tier 3 or a tier 4 support, these are people that have very specialized knowledge on very large scale networking equipment, where in a single city, you might have 2 of them. You might have 2 boxes in Denver, 2 of those devices in Miami, 2 of those devices in LA. Now, how do you work directly with those? You don't. You can't. You install them. Very often you're installing them remotely. Somebody's actually doing the legwork at that data center. And when you need to work on that equipment, you are connecting from your home, from your remote site to those devices, LA, Denver, Miami, wherever it happens to be, because it's impractical for you to now hop on a plane, fly to that city, make one configuration change, and then fly back. That makes no sense. But there are so few people in the world that know how to do that on this equipment that working remotely seems to give you a little bit of, you have a little leverage now. You can work remotely because of the knowledge you have. So that is something that I found very, very, very consistently when I've been working with these very large enterprises pretty much my entire career, is that the more you know and the more specialty you know about those particular technologies, the more unique knowledge you have of those, the more I tend to see people working remotely in that way. Now, obviously, things have changed quite a bit since COVID. There have been pushes to get people brought into the office, to not be in the office. More people want to be remote, but companies don't want you to be remote. There's a lot of back and forth over this. These things tend to work themselves out. That's kind of the beauty of the, if there is a beauty of capitalism, that is a beauty of capitalism. These things tend to take care of themselves. There is a money versus time versus your ability to do this that we can all work on. So we're starting to see that work itself out in the industry. And I'm still seeing people who are very specialized still have those remote jobs. I see a lot of people starting in the industry that want remote positions, and I'm not seeing a lot of those anymore. I think we've pretty much gotten rid of those at this point. Maybe the tides will turn again and we'll have more entry levels working remotely in the future. You never know what's going to work out with that. If you want to work remotely, I would say that you should probably have a look now at jobs that are being posted for remote work, especially in the world of networking. See what they're doing. Who is that for those particular jobs? And really look at those job postings objectively. Have a look at what they are asking for. And you probably will see on that list some very, very specialized infrastructure that you need to be very familiar with. I mean, super familiar with. Very often the people that were doing this type of work are people that used to work at the company that manufactured the equipment, and they learned so much from that, they can now use that knowledge and leverage it to work remotely wherever they would like to be. Sort of the way it works in the industry right now, and maybe it will continue to be that way. Maybe it will change in the future. You just never know. You have no idea where these things are going to go. I know we're past top of the hour. I want to get one more of these maybe done before we close up for the time frame. We've got a lot to go through this list. Here's a great place to focus on that. This is from Tim. It says, Professor Messer, during last month's Aftershow, I told you I was taking my Network Plus exam that next day, Saturday morning. I took the exam and passed. I am now Network Plus certified. I need some type of air horn here. I need the applause button to go off. Congratulations, Tim, on your new Network Plus certification. Thank you for closing the loop with us and filling us in on how they take all your advice in studying and preparing. They should do well. So there's the focus. Tim has kind of qualified the things that we have been talking about during this study group, which is if you're planning to take your Network Plus exam, you need to understand every topic that is listed on those exam objectives. You need to be able to explain to yourself or to someone else what that particular topic is about and how you would apply that technology within the networks that we run today. And then you need to make sure that you follow our videos. Maybe you've got a good book that you work through. Maybe you've gone through the process of using something like CertMaster Practice to be able to do some practice questions. And you've gone through the process of maybe working at the command prompt. We did some of that today where you performed a trace route. You looked at, you did a dig command or you did a NS lookup command. Those are useful things to know at the command prompt, especially for your exam. Have all of that under your belt. Know that every single one of those topics has been memorized. You understand the details of those, and you will do just fine on your exam. Just like Tim said. Tim said, follow that process, and you will have success with this type of certification and really any certification that you will take in the industry. I probably have, 20 to 25 certification exams I've taken in this industry through the years. That might be low. I should probably count them out. But every single one of them had a similar process where you figure out what they're going to ask on the exam. Most of the time, it's very high-level topics that they give. CompTIA is great. CompTIA tells you everything at a detailed level. You don't really see that on a lot of other certification exams. So you're already at an advantage. You already know what's going to be asked of you. Now you just need to study it. Now you just need to lock it in and really understand the scope and how it fits into the big picture. This is not a difficult exam. I think a lot of people would agree that this is an exam that gives you a very broad set of topics, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of topics, but we never go super deep with any of them, because you will get to that level where you're going super deep, but you have to start somewhere. You have to learn the terms. You have to learn how to talk to network people in network terms. And the best way to do that is to get this overview that's provided in Network Plus. And I think if you're planning to really take any type of IT certification exam, whether it's from CompTIA, whether it's from Cisco, Microsoft, Palo Alto Networks, whoever it happens to be, you go through the same process every time. Find out what they're going to talk to you about. Learn everything you can about every single topic. Get as much hands-on and Q&A as you can do, and then you'll be ready to step in and take this exam. This is a common process, but it's one that takes a lot of work, a lot of dedication. For those of you that are in the studying process, I absolutely understand what you're going through. It's hard to turn off the social media. It's hard to turn off the games. It's hard to turn off the television. You need to focus. You need to find the way that works best for you. Everybody studies in different ways. Some people like studying with other folks. Some people like studying on their own. Some people like watching videos. Some people like reading books. I don't care which method you use. Find the one that works for you. If you need to be in a different place to study, if you need to be at home to study, might be different depending on who you are. All of those will work towards learning all of this content. On average, it takes people for the Network Plus exam about 2 to 3 months to get all of this information really embedded in your brain and ready to take the exam. Sometimes it takes less time. For someone like me, it might take me 6 months because I have so little time to study that I'm really studying over an extended period of time. And I'm the kind of person that really likes to get into the information and really start to understand the details of it. So it is going to take me a little bit more time. Other people are under the gun. They're being asked to do something very quickly, and they need to get it done in a number of weeks. Well, your study process and the study habits that you have will be very different in that scenario. But I think on average, 2 to 3 months is probably a pretty good number to work with. Tim, congratulations on your new Network Plus certification. I hope that's given you the knowledge and perhaps maybe the impetus to continue with certifications, continue with the learning. In IT, we never stop learning. You may think, oh, I've done my A+, my Network Plus, and Security Plus. We're all done with certifications forever. We never have to learn anything new again. Nope, you'll be doing something new and learning something new every time you sit down with these technologies, because they are constantly throwing you curveballs. And quite honestly, there's no possible way any single human being can learn everything you would ever need to know about all of these technologies. And that's where you focusing on a particular niche of technologies can really serve you well. If you become an expert in any one of these very niche technologies, pick whatever it is. Is it switching? Is it routing? Is it firewalling? Is it cloud-based technologies? Is it infrastructure as code? What is it? Pick the thing that you are most interested in, learn everything you can about it, and you will be surprised in a very short period of time, a relatively short period of time, you will become the de facto expert in your organization for that particular technology. And you can use that knowledge to be able to learn other topics, become even more of an expert in that field, and perhaps use that to leverage into higher level positions as you effectively level up in the world of networking. It's something that's very common for IT. It gives you the ability to set where you want your path to go. And now you get to decide, what type of things do I want out of my career? What type of balance do I want to have with the things I do at home? Do I want to travel a lot? Do I not want to travel at all? The more specialized you become and the more knowledge you have of these technologies, the more control and the more leverage you have over all of those different topics. So if you want to work remotely or you don't want to work remotely, that's how you would determine the best way to do it, and perhaps even focus on getting you into the position that you've always wanted to be in. If anybody who's spent all of their time studying and continues to learn these topics will become an expert in that particular niche and will be able to effectively make your own decisions about where you go and how you do it. I can't speak to the markets and where you live. It might be different depending on where you are in the world. There might be different emphasis on different technologies, but the same idea applies. Once you focus on a particular niche, you really do become a lot more knowledgeable than other people around you, and that becomes very valuable. You might be able to take advantage of that. It's something that you will continue to do throughout your career too. I think in my career, I have sort of switched niches multiple times because that's the way technology works. The things that we are doing today will be very different than the networks that we're working with 20 years from now. So you've got to keep studying. You have to keep learning these new technologies. You have to keep working with them or you will be left behind. You have to be able to keep up with everyone else. That's the most important part of that. Well, I think that brings us to the end of another hour of our study group in this after show. Thank you so much for the questions that you have submitted. Thank you for the things that you have done throughout this entire year. You've been here every month watching these videos, participating on our live streams, sending me notes. You're in our Discord. We are so appreciative of everything that you have done to support what we are doing here. Hopefully, we're able to provide you with the information you need to get that job or get that next better job in IT. That might give you something to think about for the new year as well. We'd love to see you in the new year. We will continue to do these live study groups throughout 2026. Hopefully you can join us for that as well. Thank you so much for being here. Remember, we have our Security Plus study group 2 days from now, our last live stream of the year. Make sure you show up for that if you're interested at all in the Security Plus certification. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody.